Court in Providence is viral gold. Feel-good justice, compassionate judge. Internet legend. By 2019, Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom moments have been viewed over 80 million times. People love watching him forgive parking tickets, dismiss fines, and offer second chances. This episode starts like any other. Cameras rolling, courtroom packed, routine traffic case about to unfold. Then Aquana walks in, still wearing her hotel housekeeping uniform, name tag faded but visible. Caprio reads the charge. Expired registration, $500 fine. The audience settles in, expecting the usual. Caprio will reduce the fine, maybe dismiss it, everyone will cry, case closed. But then Aquana explains why she couldn't renew her registration. The courtroom goes completely silent. Even the cameramen stop adjusting their angles. What comes next isn't scripted television justice. It's not a feel-good moment engineered for viral clicks. It's a sentence that will break judicial protocol and rewrite what a judge can actually do when he sees a human being instead of a case number. The crumpled ticket in Caprio's hand suddenly holds the whole truth. Frank Caprio didn't grow up with courtroom dreams. He grew up in Federal Hill, Providence's Italian neighborhood, the son of Italian immigrants who worked produce stands and factory floors. By March 2019, he'd spent over 40 years as a municipal court judge, presiding over the kinds of cases most people forget: parking violations, traffic tickets, expired registrations. But Court in Providence, the television show filming his courtroom sessions, had turned him into something unexpected, an internet phenomenon. Videos of his compassionate rulings racked up tens of millions of views. People called him the kindest judge in America. He deflected the praise. "I just treat people like human beings," he'd say. But this case, the one with Aquana and the crumpled $500 ticket, wasn't going to be about kindness. It was going to be about seeing what every system in America had trained itself not to see. The ticket sat on his bench that morning, ordinary paper with extraordinary weight. Before the day ended, it would become evidence of a crisis hiding in plain sight. Aquana was 34 years old in March 2019, working 2 jobs to keep 3 kids fed and housed. Morning shift as a housekeeper at a Providence hotel. Night shift packing boxes at a warehouse on the edge of town. 15-hour days, 6 days a week. Her car was a 15-year-old sedan with rust along the doors and a check engine light that had been on for 2 years. One morning in the early 2019, a Providence police officer pulled her over for a broken tail light. Routine stop. But when he ran her plates, he found the registration had expired 3 months earlier. The fine, $500, or 30 days with a suspended license, which meant losing both jobs, which meant losing everything. Aquana took the ticket without arguing, folded it twice, and put it in the glove compartment. She drove to work. That night, after her warehouse shift ended at 2 a.m., she sat in the hotel parking lot and did the math. $500 equaled 2 weeks of groceries for her kids. It equaled the difference between rent and eviction. It equaled an impossible choice between following the law and keeping her family alive. She circled the court date in red pen. The ticket stayed in the glove compartment for 6 weeks, a ticking countdown she couldn't stop. 6 weeks before her court date, Aquana's landlord knocked on her apartment door and handed her a notice. Rent was going up $200 a month, effective immediately. She'd been barely making it before. Now the math didn't just fail, it collapsed completely. She had 3 days to decide: stay and starve, or leave and try something else. On a Thursday night in February, she packed everything she and her kids owned into her sedan. Clothes, school supplies, 2 sleeping bags, a pillow her youngest refused to sleep without. She told her kids they were going on an adventure, camping in the car for a little while until they found a better place. Her oldest, 11 years old, looked at her like he knew she was lying, but didn't say anything. She parked outside a 24-hour diner on the edge of Providence. Free Wi-Fi, bathrooms, coffee if she could afford it. She dropped her kids at school every morning, worked her hotel shift, picked them up, worked her warehouse shift, then returned to the diner parking lot to sleep for 3 hours before starting again. The crumpled traffic ticket was still in her glove compartment. The court date was getting closer, and the impossible choice kept getting more impossible. Judge Caprio reviewed between 40 and 60 cases every day. Traffic violations mostly. Expired meters, broken taillights, unpaid fines. His court clerk, a woman named Sandra who'd worked with him for over a decade, knew which cases needed his attention before the hearing even started. When she flagged Aquana's file with a yellow sticky note, Caprio paid attention. He opened the folder. 2 W-2 forms attached, both showing income just above the poverty line. Address listed an apartment on the south side of Providence. No prior offenses. Clean driving record. Standard case, except for Sandra's handwritten note at the bottom. Judge, she called 3 times asking about payment plans. Sounded desperate. Caprio knew what that meant. It meant someone choosing between the law and survival. He'd seen it 1,000 times. The system was designed to generate revenue, not to ask why someone couldn't pay. A $500 fine for expired registration might be an annoyance for someone with money. For someone without it, it was a trap door into catastrophe. He closed the file and made a mental note. When Aquana's name was called that morning, he'd asked the right questions. He didn't know yet that the answers would force him to break every rule he'd followed for 40 years. March 2019, 9 a.m. The courtroom filled with the usual crowd. Defendants waiting their turn, a few lawyers, court staff, and the television crew filming for Court in Providence. Caprio took his seat. The first few cases went quickly. A parking ticket dismissed, a speeding fine reduced, the routine rhythm of municipal justice. Then Sandra called Aquana's name. She walked to the podium wearing her hotel housekeeping uniform. The name tag on her chest read Aquana in faded letters. Her hands gripped the podium so hard Caprio could see her knuckles turning white. He glanced at the file, then at her. "Miss Aquana," he said, "you're here for driving with expired registration. $500 fine. Can you tell me why you didn't renew your registration?" Standard question. He'd asked it 100 times. But Aquana's answer wasn't standard. She opened her mouth to speak, then stopped mid-sentence. Her voice cracked. "Your Honor," she said quietly, "I've been living in my car with my kids for the past 6 weeks." The courtroom went completely silent. The camera operators stopped adjusting their equipment. The court clerk looked up from her desk. Caprio leaned forward. "Where are your children right now?" he asked. "At school," Aquana said. "They don't know we're homeless." Aquana explained the math that had destroyed her life. Eviction, rent increase she couldn't afford, 2 jobs that still weren't enough, the choice between renewing her car registration and feeding her children. She chose her children. The law said that was the wrong choice. Now she was standing in front of a judge, still wearing her work uniform, explaining why she'd broken a rule designed for people who had $500 to spare. Caprio held the crumpled traffic ticket in his hand and felt its weight change. This wasn't just paper anymore. It was evidence of a system that punished poverty as if it were a crime. He looked at the ticket, then at Aquana, then at the cameras recording every second. The audience in the courtroom expected what they always got from Court in Providence. A compassionate moment, maybe a reduced fine, definitely tears and applause. Caprio knew that wasn't going to be enough. Dismissing a $500 fine wouldn't solve homelessness. It wouldn't get Aquana and her kids out of that car. It wouldn't fix the system that had put them there in the first place. He made a decision that went beyond his authority as a judge. He was about to stop being a referee and become an intervener. "Miss Aquana," Caprio said, "I'm not just dismissing this fine." The courtroom went quiet. This wasn't part of the script. Caprio reached into his jacket and pulled out his personal checkbook. He wrote a check for $500 right there on the bench in front of the cameras. Then he handed it to the bailiff and told him to give it to Aquana. But he didn't stop there. He asked the bailiff for his contact list and called a local housing non-profit during the court session on camera while everyone watched. He explained the situation. Single mother, 3 kids, living in her car, working 2 jobs. He arranged an emergency housing voucher. The courtroom erupted. This wasn't television justice. This wasn't a feel-good moment manufactured for viral clicks. This was a judge stepping outside every boundary of his role and deciding that one human life mattered more than protocol. Aquana stood at the podium, crying. The cameras kept rolling. The video would be uploaded within hours. Within days, it would reach millions. Within weeks, it would reach over 80 million people and spark a national conversation about fines, poverty, and what justice actually means when you're choosing between the law and survival. The video went viral faster than anyone expected. 80 million views within the first month. Comments flooded in from around the world. People praising Caprio, people sharing their own stories of fines they couldn't pay, people asking why the system worked this way in the first place. Donations poured into Providence housing non-profits. Over $200,000 in the first 2 weeks alone, all earmarked for single parents facing eviction. Aquana got her emergency housing voucher. She moved her kids into a small apartment on the north side of Providence. She kept both her jobs. Media outlets requested interviews. She declined most of them. "I'm not special," she said when one reporter finally caught up with her. "There are thousands like me. I'm just the one who got seen." But not everyone celebrated what Caprio had done. Lawyers watching the video saw something troubling. A judge had stepped outside his judicial role. He'd used personal funds to pay a defendant's fine. He'd intervened in her life in ways that went far beyond dismissing a charge. Some called it compassion. Others called it a dangerous precedent. Judges aren't social workers, they argued. They're supposed to apply the law, not rewrite it on camera. The Rhode Island Judicial Ethics Board opened a review. They examined the video, read the case file, and interviewed Caprio. Some board members argued that what he'd done was improper. It set a precedent that could undermine judicial neutrality. Others defended him, saying that moral imperatives sometimes supersede procedural rules. Caprio didn't apologize. When asked if he'd do it again, he said, "If caring about a human life is wrong, then I'm guilty." The board ultimately issued a formal warning, but no punishment. The decision acknowledged that Caprio had crossed boundaries, but it also recognized that those boundaries had been designed without considering cases like Aquana's. The system was broken. Caprio had simply been the first judge willing to break protocol in order to fix one small piece of it. But the damage was done. The case had exposed something uncomfortable. Judicial independence is fragile. Public pressure can force judges to act in ways that blur the line between justice and activism, and once that line is blurred, it's hard to redraw it. The crumpled traffic ticket, now filed away in court records, had become more than evidence. It had become a symbol of every invisible person the system was designed to miss. Investigative journalists started digging into Providence's municipal court records. What they found confirmed what Caprio had known for years. Aquana wasn't an isolated case. Over 1,000 people every year faced fines they couldn't pay, fines that spiraled into suspended licenses, lost jobs, evictions, and homelessness. The system was designed to generate revenue, not to ask why someone couldn't afford to follow the law. Traffic fines, parking violations, expired registrations, all of it fed into municipal budgets. Poor people paid the price, literally and figuratively. Caprio had seen this pattern for decades, but he'd never had the leverage to change it. The viral video gave him that leverage. He used the publicity to push for court reform. He testified before the Rhode Island state legislature, arguing for mandatory payment plans for low-income defendants and community service alternatives to cash fines. He spoke at legal conferences, wrote op-eds, and used every platform he could find to explain what the video had revealed. The system punished poverty as if it were a crime. And the solution wasn't charity or viral moments. It was structural change that recognized people like Aquana as human beings, not revenue sources. In 2020, the Rhode Island legislature introduced a bill, Traffic Fine Reform, mandatory payment plans for low-income defendants, community service alternatives to cash fines. Legal advocates called it the Caprio Amendment, though that wasn't its official name. Caprio testified before the committee, explaining how a $500 fine could destroy a life when that life was already hanging by a thread. The bill passed. Rhode Island became one of the first states to implement systemic alternatives to cash-based fines for poverty-level defendants. Over 40 other states began studying the Providence model. Law schools added the case to their curricula, using it to discuss judicial ethics, systemic poverty, and the limits of legal authority. The video continued circulating. New viewers discovered it every week. The comments section became a space where people shared their own stories of fines they couldn't pay, jobs they lost, families they watched fall apart because the system demanded money they didn't have. One viral moment had become a national policy conversation, and at the center of it all was a crumpled traffic ticket that had started as ordinary paper and ended as a symbol of everything the system refused to see. 2 years later, Aquana was still in the same apartment on the north side of Providence. She still worked 2 jobs. Her kids still went to school. They still didn't know they'd lived in a car for 6 weeks. She kept the crumpled traffic ticket in a kitchen drawer, folded twice, just like it had been in her glove compartment. It wasn't a trophy. It was a reminder of how close the system had come to destroying her family. A reminder that she wasn't special. There were thousands like her, still invisible, still choosing between the law and survival. Media outlets still requested interviews occasionally. She declined most of them. "I'm just one person," she told a reporter who caught her outside her apartment one morning. "There are so many others who didn't get seen." She was right, but she was also the one who had been seen, and because one judge with a television camera decided to break protocol, the system had been forced to acknowledge what it had been designed to ignore. People like Aquana weren't criminals. They were just poor. Judge Frank Caprio still presides over Providence Municipal Court. He still reviews 40 to 60 cases a day. Traffic violations, parking tickets, expired registrations. Caught in Providence still films his courtroom sessions. The show still goes viral. But something changed after Aquana's case. Caprio keeps a copy of that crumpled traffic ticket in his chambers. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. Every time he sees a routine fine, he remembers how close the system came to destroying a family. Every time someone stands at the podium explaining why they couldn't pay, he remembers how easily invisible people stay invisible. The ticket sits on his desk, ordinary paper with extraordinary weight. It reminds him that justice isn't always what the law demands. Sometimes it's what humanity requires. Sometimes it's a judge stepping outside his role and deciding that one person's life matters more than protocol. And sometimes it's a crumpled piece of paper that started as a $500 punishment and ended as a national movement. The ticket hasn't changed, but what it means has transformed completely. From evidence of a violation to evidence of a system that violates human dignity every single day.